growth with my ninth graders this year, with their vocabulary around peer relationships and adult to student relationships. I've been really impressed with how they've grown. It also provides factual information to help students navigate the abundance of false information. So this is really different than when I was a student. When I was a student, I was fortunate. I had a decent health curriculum, but there was no information, right? So we talked to our friends, and that was the information that you got. And so health class was really about like absorbing, okay, some facts. The kids now, there is so much information, but they don't know what is true and what is a good resource and what is false or what might not be exactly true. And so this is a way for them to be able to kind of vet what they're learning or what their peers say with what they know. Sitting through the anatomy and physiology class with Taylor, was that 2 classes ago? I really realized like how much ninth graders don't know, and how they really struggle with even the vocabulary of the anatomy. And so that was really eye-opening. I don't remember at what age you kind of start to have a sense of that, but there isn't, they know slang, they're decent with slang, but they really struggle with the actual vocabulary. And then it also opens the door for conversations at home. So I know I have 2 middle schoolers, and I know for me, even though I talk to other kids about difficult topics all of the time, it can be really hard for my kids to talk to me about it. But if I know something's happening at school, it's much easier for me to come home and be like, oh, I heard you, Miss Edelin said that she was talking to you guys about this in character class, or she was talking about this. And then they'll give me like a teeny little bit, but it's something that I can build on, and it opens the door, and they don't feel like I'm just introducing it to them. Because when I just introduce something to them, they kind of are like, okay, mom, like a little too much. But when it's something that was talked about in school, it kind of opens the door a little bit. So, we just want these kids, we want them to, when they leave us, to be healthy, to feel satisfied, to have the tools to go on and live like a really healthy, satisfying life. And I think that when we look at what creates resiliency and relationships, and also some of the most brilliant people that we know, and how negative relationships can really impact their happiness and success, we want our kids to have the whole package when they leave here. We want them to feel like they have all the tools in their toolkit to live a happy, successful life. So we're really excited to be working with Taylor this year. And like I said, she's working with our 9 through 12, and Kate is working with our middle school students on sexuality education, healthy relationships, conflict resolution. And so I'm going to pass it on and let the expert fill you in and all the good stuff.
All right, thank you. Hello. Hi.
So we're looking.
Mm-hmm. All right.
That looks great. That's perfect.
All right.
Yes, please. No one's blocking you. Sit wherever you want. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, hi. Hello, everyone, and folks online. Do we have some folks online too, or are we just like live stream? Okay. Hi, folks online. Come this way. I'm like trying to, except I'm afraid I'm gonna like lean on this wire and like unplug it. Just being, what's it?
You want me to do it, or you go?
Oh, whatever you want. I think I can do it. It's no problem. So I was just like gonna like lean against this wire or something, like knock things over. But hi, hello everyone. So my name is Taylor. I am an educator at Planned Parenthood in Louisville. As Julianne said, I've been there. I like hate even admitting it, because I'm like, how did 14 years happen? But it did. I've been at Planned Parenthood for 14 years. I've been doing the education piece more like 10 years. Before that, I was doing grant writing and some things like that. I went to University of Louisville and I got my master's in social work there. I was at Murray State before that. These are my two home children. I call them like my home children and my work children. And so we've talked a bit about Teen Council, which is our peer education program. We are lucky to have a few collegiate students in Teen Council. And actually we had a Teen Council peer educator that connected us to collegiate to begin with. Thank you. And actually I have a little Teen Council slide. So this is Mia, who I actually knew from middle school. She went to St. Francis in Goshen, where we had taught at their middle school. And she got to high school, went to collegiate, and started with Teen Council, which is our peer education program, and connected us to collegiate, and here we are. So, I mean, I think that's just like the story of the what and why Teen Council is, and really my philosophy when it comes to sex education is that it should be peer-led, right? Youth-centered, peer-led. And so Mia kind of having this education, training to teach it, connecting at her school is kind of the kind of encapsulates what we hope to achieve. And so I'll read this quick here because I don't know how well y'all can read it on the screen, but so it's our Teen Councils, our peer education program. So our mission is to empower, educate, and inspire those we know, including our peers, families, and communities. Teen Council educates about human sexuality and healthy decision-making. We use our voices to advocate for just and humane sexual attitudes and policies. So it's basically a youth group. We meet once a week during the school year. We have this year 14 members from around Louisville Metro. And they meet every week and they learn a different topic related to sexuality education. And then they train to teach themselves. They lead formal education, like formal presentations, so lessons with us. So Mia, because this is her second year, has been teaching a bunch of the classes to the ninth graders we've been doing already. We have a couple sophomores this year as well who are training. Even when they're new to the program, they're still, of course, right? We know young people are talking about these topics, relationships and bodies and all the things. And so we call that informal education, where they're just out talking to their families, their parents, their friends, their classmates about healthy relationships, safer sex, body image, consent, gender, all the things. So this is Mia teaching the ninth graders in the fall, and I want to read you all this so you can see, as you can tell by the, very sad handwriting that everyone has now, like more and more, right? Our handwriting is struggling more and more that everything is so online. So you can see the realness of this by the handwriting here, but it says, "Good job, Mia. I think it is very beneficial that someone our age is teaching us. I think you should keep that." So we had a lot of great feedback from Mia. You could just feel the conversation, right, change in the room all the time she was there when she was teaching them. And so, yes, what else do I want to say? So that's a little bit about me. I think a little bit about Planned Parenthood. Anything else about that you would want? Any questions you'll have about any of those? Who we are, what we're doing? Perfect. All right, so a few things I was going to talk to y'all about today, and I'm really open to what you are most interested in. So if folks, you're on a Zoom, right? If they want to put anything in the chat, please let us know. Y'all, please let me know. So I have a couple slides just to talk about kind of teen sexual development, adolescent brain development, and how that can inform us, right, as parents, as people who work with youth, and how we talk to them about these topics. So a few slides about that. As you saw my little ones in the beginning, I have a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old, soon to be 5 and 9. And so I've been talking to parents and teaching about this stuff for many years, and now I'm like starting to, live it all myself. And I find myself thinking and understanding these things. And actually, whenever my parents will complain about me as a teenager, I'll be like, okay, well, now I know because of adolescent brain development, right, what was going on. So yeah, we can talk a little bit about that. We can talk about the programs, right? So some of the students have done surveys. So all the high school students have done surveys, like what they want to learn, what they know. So we can talk a bit about that. What else do we say? Trying to remember what all of my slides were. Answer questions. Mm-hmm.
I thought it would be most helpful to kind of know what the kids were asking.
Yes.
So we have that survey information.
Yes. Okay, cool. So I figured I was going to see what folks are most interested in, right? And start there. And then if we want to hop back to this, but sometimes you get chatting on it and then it's like the time will go. And so if that's the biggest interest, I want to start there and then we'll come back to some of this stuff. Sound good to folks? Anything else? Please let me know. All right. So this is our team development stuff. We'll hop back to that. And we can kind of come back and see, right, when I tell you what we're teaching about, what the students have requested and sort of the approach and how that aligns, right, with what is actually going on in their brains and bodies. Okay. So we did surveys. I did a pre-test and a post-test with all of our 9th grade students. And then we've just done surveys with our 10th and 11th graders because they're going to be taking the classes together as one group. And then with our seniors. Of course, seniors, especially spring semester, are in just such a different boat than everyone else. It's such a amazing, strange time for anyone who works with high school students and knows high school seniors in spring. Like, I always laugh with teen council, like, I'm guaranteed to have like a senior fall out of a chair, like sometime, like just consistently every year, like someone just falls out of a chair spring semester because their minds are just, it's like their whole future is just right here and they're not quite there yet. And it's just, they're just squirrely and wild and fun and excited. And they can't sit in chairs because it's just such a just unique period of time in our lives. So the seniors are going to be doing their thing. We have their surveys sort of separate because especially spring semester, they're, in their own world. So this is all stuff pretty much. These couple slides are from our 10th and 11th graders. And then I have one later. Hello, from our 9th graders. So I had given them a list of the topics that we're going to be covering and just sort of asked them, like, is this what you want to know? Like, how helpful or useful is this? And so of those topics, I had given them healthy relationships, anatomy and reproduction, consent, sexually transmitted infections, STDs, STIs, and safer sex. And so the ones that we had the biggest response, that was very positive, right? Everything was on this end of the scale for all of them. But the biggest ones were consent and safer sex that they were wanting to know. So as you can see here, we had them like this was like consent, and then I put in here the questions that we hope to answer, right, in a consent class. So the questions we have here are, what does consent in romantic and sexual relationships look like, sound like, and how do I know if my partner is getting consent? Those are what we call our essential questions, that we hope they can answer after the class. And so then I asked them, how useful or relevant is this to you? And so our 5s are going to be very useful, relevant, this is neutral, this is not so much, and this is not at all, right? So you can see this was kind of our highest, consent was one of our highest topics, and I pulled a few of their comments, and they also had a chance to write in comments at the bottom. So what do you learn about, like, what do you want to learn about? What are we missing? What specific questions do you have? So here's some of the things that they said, and actually Julianne and I were talking about this a bit. There was a lot of really useful stuff for me, for us in the surveys to focus on the classes, but there's also so many things that I felt was important for us to share with parents. And you'll see from some of these questions, right, they're really the conversations that y'all want to be having. And that's what I always say when I'm talking to the kids, right, to parents, like just anything about our programs is, sex ed, it can be controversial. Really, it's not super controversial. Like when you ask people, like, what do you want kids to learn in school? What parents and families want to teach their kids is values and decision-making, relationships, right? Like, what does our family believe? What do I want you to consider when making decisions for your lives, your relationships? But most families aren't, like, they're fine with me teaching them about chlamydia, right? They're like, we want to talk about values, decision-making, body image. You can do like the STDs, the anatomy stuff. That's, so there were some really powerful things that came out of those surveys that I think y'all will be interested in talking to your kids about. And that, of course, is the big impact. And then, of course, it guided me, right, in all of the sort of content things that I want to share with them. And a big part of it is kind of, as you were saying as well, they have, and they said it in their surveys too, right? They have the internet, right? They have all the information in the world at their fingertips. And like I said, I've been doing this 15 years and seen, with social media changing and, youth are more and more informed than ever, but it's the context, right, that they lack. It's the discussions. It's the, like, what does this mean for me? How do I navigate just all of this information? And so I find our classes, some things are really heavy on content. So today we talked about sexually transmitted infections, STDs. So it's like a lot of information about STDs, what they are, how they spread. And then other things like with healthy relationships, I'm just trying to prompt a discussion between them, right? Because they are the ones who have the real impact on one another, right? It's their relationships. They're the ones that know what's going on with their peers. And so I kind of make prompts for them to discuss and kind of lead the discussion so they can think about what it is they believe, right? What they want, what they believe. That's what I always tell them, right? You may or may not feel like this information is relevant to you now, but what I hope you take away with is just to think about what it is I believe, what it is I want, right? What decisions do I want to make for myself before I'm in that situation? Because the worst time you can make that decision is when you're in the situation, when you're in the moment. Okay, so here's a few of the things they said about consent. In my opinion, a common myth my peers have is that sex is owed and it's wrong to quote unquote hold out on people. How to deal with sexual assault, when to know that someone is crossing the line. And I've been exposed to men making inappropriate comments about my body, maybe educate them on what is okay and not okay to say. So to me, these were, really powerful, hearing these from these young people. And like I said, I'll talk to them about what is consent, right? What does it really look like? How is it different than the movies? Like, what are your rights? But this one, right? Like, I've been exposed to men making inappropriate comments about my body. These are 15-year-olds, right? And I don't think this is going to surprise anyone, right? If you've been a 15-year-old girl, if you've had a 15-year-old girl, you know that unfortunately we live in a world where people feel entitled to be commenting on their bodies, right? And treating them like they're older women and not teenage girls, not like they're not still children. And so those are the things that some kids will come home and tell you that, a lot of them won't, right? They're embarrassed. And so I think for parents to know that these are the things that our daughters, in this case, are experiencing is important. And, they're at that age where they may or may not be telling you that. Obviously, how to deal with sexual assault, important, powerful, kind of, like I said, my daughter's about to be 9. And so just thinking about our kids having to think about this is hard. But it's the reality, right? And then, of course, a common myth is that my peer thinks sex is owed and it's wrong to hold out, right? I mean, these are right, their own words, their exact words, and those are the things that we want to know to be talking to them. So, I mean, the real power, the real impact, the real behavior change, right, is when I'm giving them information, right? They're having the conversations with themselves, and then their parents are having those conversations with them, about what we believe, and you're kind of getting them from all those sides, because, being a teenager in 2022 is a lot. Questions, comments, thoughts about consent? Anybody? Anything else you want to say about consent?
The kids are really great with conversation.
They've handled it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. They do, and they've done well challenging themselves, challenging each other, but being respectful. And I've seen just the growth, right, as you were saying, between our fall class and this semester. And I mean, that's just 9th grade. I also think about our 9th graders. And I know we've got, I think we said we had sophomore parents and junior parents, just the time that they missed because of COVID, like their virtual year. So our 9th graders missed the 7th grade. And I say 7th grade is like the hardest and the worst. And it's almost like, that'd be great to miss 7th grade, right? 7th grade's the worst. But it's like, it also kind of rips the Band-Aid off of just that hard growing pains that they go through in middle school. And I think them missing that has drawn out some of the pain of the 7th grade. It's like they're having to do it all kind of trickling out, right, through 8th and 9th grade. 7th graders are so mean to each other. That's why, they'll be so respectful to me. I'll go into a school and they're just sweet as can be to me, and then they're just tearing each other to shreds. And it's a hard year, but it's hard because it's such a year of growth. I think sophomore year is the other one that's like that. Just these years that are just so transitional, right, in our life. Nope. Okay, so the other one that we especially got a big response to was safer sex. STDs was pretty similar. So for safer sex, questions we're going to be trying to answer are, what are barrier methods that can protect me from STDs? How effective are condoms and birth control? How do I use a condom most effectively? What is emergency contraception and how does it work? As you can see, again, we had like, more than half the group here was very interested in this. This was one of the big topics that they wanted to learn about, and I'll read you some of their feedback on those topics. And I'll read this first one, okay? The different methods of birth control, especially since a lot of the burden falls on women, I want to be educated on the options and how to receive the options if necessary. And so I was kind of interpreting this as being from a guy, right? A young man who's saying like, I want to support my partner. So, someone's out there, somebody's son is really out there, being very thoughtful as this 10th or 11th grader. It's like the burden falls on women. Or do you think you read it the other way? Maybe that they were the woman and they're saying, since I'm the woman. I don't know. In my mind, because I've been hearing these boys stepping up lately, I guess we could see that either way. Either way, right? Birth control. This one I think was important. I think, of course, healthy relationships / consent conversations are important. I do feel that has been discussed more, while we basically haven't covered STDs or birth control at all, which is worrisome because there are sexually active members of the community who have never been educated on those measures. And then this last one, I had, I'd say probably 4 or 5 comments that specifically talked about sex ed for LGBTQ or queer youth. And so this person said, I feel like I don't know anything about gay sex. I've heard a lot about straight sex, but nothing about gay sex. Like I said, I probably had 4 or 5 comments that was like queer sex ed for LGBTQ youth, all those sorts of things. I remember, it reminds me, I was actually at St. Francis in Goshen. I was with 7th graders and we did a question box. And I had one, and this kid had written in the tiniest handwriting, like, I'm gay and I don't even know what gay sex is or something. But they had just written it so tiny, they had just written it so small. And that really just kind of stuck to me. It was like, this kid was feeling so, you could see them thinking about their identity, and they didn't even know where to begin it. They didn't know how to ask the question. It's like they were embarrassed, but they really wanted to ask it. Of course, those were 7th graders, right? So I wasn't going into terrible detail. With 7th graders, for that question, I'll just say things like, there's all different ways, right? People can be sexual with one another, and some things like that. That was 7th grade, right? So we didn't get into a lot, right? It's more about details and are more about relationships and decision making and talking to your parents and those sorts of things. But those questions, right? And just that always reminds me of they wrote it so small because they really wanted it, but you could feel that embarrassment and that shame when they didn't know where to go. And so, yes, we had a lot about this. How we approach that, right, is that there are many different types of sexual behaviors that people of all genders and identities participate in, and we really focus on how these infections are transmitted. I always tell them, right, my job is to tell you what the infections are, right, what STDs are, how they're transmitted, your options to protect yourself, and then you decide, right, with any given person at any given point in your life, what level of risk do you want to take, what level of protection do you want to have. And so we say, and so that's one of our sort of quick classroom assessment things we always do. Whenever I wrap that up, we do that today with 7th graders, right? What's the first most effective way to protect yourself? Say it's abstinence, right? 100%, that's the only 100%. If and when you decide to become sexual with someone, our next most effective way is using barrier methods like condoms. A third way people reduce their risk is getting tested regularly, having one-on-one relationships, right? So we try to be as affirming and inclusive as possible as all orientations and gender identities, but there's also a whole range of behaviors that carry different amounts of risk and kind of focus on how STIs are transmitted through those behaviors as opposed to breaking it down by identity, if that makes sense. I could talk forever, so some of you'll have to holler at me. So these are the 2 big ones that they had asked about. I think that you sent the whole list of topics, right, that we were going through, but with our 9th graders, it's anatomy and reproduction, gender. So with gender, we did gender roles, gender stereotypes, a bit about gender identity, sexual orientation. I find like gender roles and stereotypes is so foundational. It comes up so much when we're talking about healthy relationships and consent, right? So many of these dynamics are very gendered. So we kind of talk about that. Then we'll talk about healthy relationships and consent. And then we'll do sexually transmitted infections, what they are, how they're transmitted, how we can protect themselves. And then we do safer sex, right? So, you know, what is effective condom use? What methods of birth control are there? And just kind of, we kind of like look at your health and future, right? So what kind of health care should you be getting? You know, how often should you go to the doctor? You know, what are these cancer screenings? Resources, yeah, those sorts of things. And so those are our, you know, 5-6 classes there. So that's the 9th grade. And then for 10th, 11th, we're doing consent. We're doing a big one on consent. We're doing STIs and safer sex. I think we're doing healthy relationships. And then the last one was kind of the catch-all. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It'll be very, oh, I'm so sorry. It'll be very similar. I'm not used to people not being able to hear me because I'm very loud. Oh, yes. Okay. Well, now you're not talking, but yes, next time. So yeah, the 10th and 11th grade is going to be pretty similar to the 9th grade. It's just going to be, I always kind of try to create the classes so that it meets the level that they're at, right? So it's like very open-ended. They have like kind of open-ended prompts and that sort of things because, you know, it's just different groups, right? Have different needs or different levels. And so I actually find like the healthy relationship activity we do with 9th graders, I do it with the same one with 7th graders and just focus on friendships, right? And we just do this like prompt, like it's like, we'll read prompts that are things like your partner texts you constantly, right? Is that healthy, unhealthy, or in the middle? And so we do that one with 9th graders and even older, right? About their dating relationships. And I find it like it works very well with 7th graders and friendships, right? Because we know in 7th grade and middle school, we can have those friendships that can feel very, can sometimes feel controlling or domineering, or people are getting jealous of friends and who you're hanging out with and all those things. So a lot of this stuff, you know, is kind of intentionally open-ended so they can kind of respond, show us where they're leading the conversation. And so the 10th and 11th graders is pretty similar to what we're doing in 9th. It's just going to be sort of, they'll be adapting it to them. And we're going to go into a little bit more detail about like consent. So like really kind of diving in on things like consent more, and like a little bit less on anatomy and things, right? So those are the classes. Any questions about the lessons that we have? Any questions, comments, thoughts, any of that stuff?
If any parents like want materials so they can also have the conversation with their kids, feel free to email me. We have a Google Doc that we can give you access to, which is part of the class. We did that for the 9th graders. We told them that, part of the homework that they would like, if they feel comfortable talking about it at home with their parents, that we said we're going to share the information with their parents about what they're learning so that they can have the conversation with them at home as part of their like kind of homework assignment.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so one of the other things we asked them on the survey, and these are the 9th graders, is what do you wish your parents and teachers understood about being a high school student in 2022? Would you want to read these for me? I feel like I've been talking a lot.
So we'll let you read.
So they said, we don't have a lot of time. It's crazy. It's hard. It's really stressful. People are engaging in sexual activities earlier. You can have friends of opposite gender without having a relationship. Not everything is the same as it was back then in their time. Not every teenager needs to be obsessed with sex. Information is extremely easily available, and a student can look up anything they want to. Nothing really. They gave me all the space and encouragement I need. I wish they understood that I'm getting older and I will have some questions. How stressful it is, especially when it comes to time management. Someone can look and act completely fine and still not be. It's much busier than it seems. I wish they understood how different it is from when they were in high school. That depression is a real thing, even if it doesn't show. A lot has changed. I'm a busy man. There's so much judgment all the time, and you have to make sure you don't do something that would spread around the whole school.
Thank you. Yeah, something that was really kind of unique and specific to collegiate as we were doing all of this is there was their main concern was about it's a small school, like whatever we talk about, everyone's gonna know, right? Everyone knows each other's business. And so I think there's a huge lot of value, right, in being this small school where you can be like so active and involved, and that it can, adapt to the needs of different times, different grades, right? Those different group dynamics. And the flip side, right, the challenges of that is it can be hard for them to be vulnerable because like everybody knows everybody's stuff, right? So that was like their big concern. I will say another thing that came up that we're not addressing too much in the classes is body image, eating disorders, body image, those sorts of things. So I'm sure that is surprising to no one, right? And something that y'all are addressing.
The ninth graders took a 4-class body image class, so they're in that rotation. So that's been really good for them.
Yeah, I think it's great. There's a whole rotation of that because that was one of the most consistent ones, and it does feel like that for the ninth grade, right? That segue between middle school and high school, right? When that stuff is just so peak. Okay. So what do they know and not know? We did a little bit of a pre-test for the ninth graders to just have them answer some questions, and then we would have them take it again at the end. So a few things that I included here, like some questions that they had, and then these little charts that showed their responses. And these are kind of specifically sexual health questions. So if used correctly, which of the following birth control methods is most effective for preventing pregnancy? So a male or an external condom, an intrauterine device, or an IUD, birth control pill, or withdrawal or pulling out. Who knows the answer? I love doing this to parents too. What do y'all think? What's the answer? Most effective. The pill, the IUD, the pull-out method. The IUD. The IUD because the pill is so easy to mess up. You know what I mean? It's like you get up today really early for school, they're up at 6 a.m. or whatever, and then on Saturday they're sleeping until 1. Right? They go spend the night there. You go spend the night at someone's house and you forget to bring the pack of pills. So the pill is just easier to mess up. Very reliable, very effective method of birth control, but it's just very easy to mess it up. The IUD, doctor puts it in, doctor takes it out. So that's going to be your more than 99% effective. You saw here the students, majority said the male or external condom. Condoms are a great way, right, to prevent pregnancy, to reduce your risk, but birth control is much more effective. So we know we need to do a little education on that. And what is the most common symptom of a sexually transmitted infection? So flu-like symptoms, bumps or sore, itching, burning when you pee, or no symptom at all. The right answer there is actually no symptoms at all. So STDs can have symptoms, but it's really common for them not to have symptoms. The only way you can know for sure if you have an infection is get tested, right? But we only had 13%, right, that knew that one. So, that's very understandable, right, to be expected. But of course, this is something that we want folks to know, right? If and when they're making decisions at whatever point in their lives, they should know, right? If they really, really want to prevent pregnancy, here's the most effective way. And then how we protect ourselves, right, from STIs. Yes, I'm going to show them a video, yeah. Oh, she did. Okay, good. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So here are some of the other, there's just some questions we asked, what specific questions you want. And so I included some here. How does Plan B work? Should you take it every time after having sex? Also curious about proper condom use. Should your first time hurt? A lot of questions for that one. What do I do if I don't have access to birth control? Is it okay to use a condom and pull out and nothing else? What are some differences between the way sex is portrayed in pornography or media, and how is it in real life? So this was a question we got from parents too. And that was brought up a few different times in different places by the teens, and then a few times from parents on the parent survey. What do I do if I end up with an accidental pregnancy? Does wrapping your willy before you get silly 100% mean it's protected? And is it true that girls have to pee right after having sex to prevent a potential UTI? So you'll see a lot of the questions, pretty much all of the questions, were very much sexual health specific, which, like I said, makes sense, right? With consent relationships, we want them talking to each other. And with this stuff, it's just a lot more factual information. Questions, comments, thoughts, anybody? All right, I think that's mostly like our, kind of what I've got for you all as far as their surveys, what we're learning. Happy to answer more questions. I also have this, which y'all can send out to folks, just as far as resources for parents. This is just a little thing I copied off of Instagram, but I really love it. It's like this mantras for parenting teens, right? Just like those things we can think about, beyond sex ed, but all the things that I think is helpful. And then I use a lot of this amaze.org. I use a lot of their videos. They have like a podcast and a ton of stuff for parents, so about becoming an askable parent. And it's also the videos I use really often in classes. They are like funny and engaging. They're very like affirming and inclusive. And they're just kind of like silly, right? So they kind of are kind of disarming in that way. So I really like them. They have them on like every topic. There's a group called Sex Positive Families. It has a ton of resources for parents. And, you can always look at like Planned Parenthood. It actually has a whole list. If you just do like Planned Parenthood resources for parents, they have a list of all these places. But amaze.org is great. They also have it for all ages. So I don't know if any folks have like younger kids, but I mean, they have things on puberty, on like, what's going on with your body, like all those things. So it has them for all ages, which is super helpful. For youth, for parents, everyone. All right. Questions, comments, thoughts, anything else we want to chat about? I know we had the pornography question, which I can answer. I can talk about brain development. What y'all think? Anybody? Yeah, I might really quickly, holler at me if I take more than like 3 minutes on this, talk about this brain development stuff. And then come back to the pornography question, because I feel like this is kind of informative. I was telling you when I got here, right? Like, as I've learned, I was just telling you all, everyone, but as I've been learning these things, my dad still likes to complain about me when I was like 13. And I was telling them, like, actually, like, that was developmentally appropriate for me. And so that's easy for me to say now when my daughter's 9. We'll see in a few years. But it's really fascinating, like, adolescent brain development. As you can see here, the only other period of our lives where we have the only period that has more rapid brain development in our lives than that early adolescence is age 0 to 3, right? So we think of babies, right? And they're learning literally breathing, swallowing, walking, talking, eating, everything, right? The period in our lives that has the next most rapid brain development is that early adolescent period, right? So their brains are just on fire, right? With the rapidness of how much they are growing and changing. You all have high school students, right? So you've survived that one, at least with a child. The other thing that's really important for us, I think, to know and understand is that our brains release more dopamine, right? That feel good, that reward hormone during adolescence than they do any other time in our lives. So that means that things that are fun when you're a teenager are like the most fun, right? So anything that's like dumb and not fun, right, is fun, especially being in the presence of peers. So being in the presence of their peers activates a reward center in their brain that makes it fun. So I always say, like, if me and my best friend go to Target to buy toothpaste, like, I will enjoy her company, but I'm not like, having the time of my life. You send 2 14-year-olds to Target and, they're like cracking up. It's the best thing that ever happened to them. They're having a blast, right? Just being in the presence of their peers activates that reward center. So what's the point of that? Like, why do our bodies do this to us, to our parents? What's the function, the biological function of that? Anybody? To create a connection with their peers beyond like their family unit, right? Because we're trying to transition them from being children into being adults, right? That's what adolescence is. And so it's saying, pull away from your parents. My mom still cries, right, about me not wanting to walk with her at the mall when I was 14. But my brain, right, was telling me, was rewarding me for wanting to walk with my friend and not with my mom, because my brain is trying to help me grow into an adult that will, leave the nest, start my own family. It's just, it's our brains telling us to grow up, right? So we can start our own families and, keep the species going and all the things. So that's what's going on, right? Is being with each other, being in the presence of peers, which means peer influence is so powerful, right? The other thing I think is really important and powerful, and I actually talk about this to the teenagers a lot, is this idea of cold cognition and hot cognition. So cold cognition is basically like your intellect, like your ability to learn things. So this is why you can have a 16-year-old who's like brilliant, right? They can do calculus. I can barely long divide. They can, know all these things about history, know all these facts. They can really level or surpass adults on an intellectual level, right? That cold cognition is fully developed by age 16. But it's what we call a hot cognition, things to do with emotions, impulsivity, long-term decision-making, emotions that is developing throughout our early and into our mid-20s, right? And so I talk to them a lot about this when we talk about age differences and relationships, is that you can be on the level, like intellectually, with someone who's older than you. And so a lot of times we'll say like, oh, well, they're just like this really mature teenager, or they know so much stuff. But that other part of our brain, right, is still developing, right? The power and the agency that you have in your life, right, is very different when you're 16 and when you're 20. So even though you can have this really intellectual conversation with someone who's older, you can't have like true consent, right? You're not on the same level because there's part of your brain that's still developing. Physical, we know all the physical things that are going on. Just the social, cultural, I'll just see, like, we kind of talked about that a bit, but we're developing at different ages. Girls are typically developing sooner, right? Getting those adult bodies, and the world is starting to treat them as if they are sexual adult women, when they can be a 14 or a 15-year-old girl. We saw one of our teens point that out. And then also how they're seeing themselves represented. So as they're dealing with all this stuff going on inside of them, the world is starting to treat them different, whether they're ready for it or not. Okay, so the question was about pornography. Let me see, pull it up, or do you have it? So I had some questions from parents. I'm gonna pull it up real quick. All right, so we had a couple of parent questions. Okay, so one said, the negative impact of social media, such as TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram on children. There is now a lot of data to indicate that such apps increase anxiety and depression in children and teenagers. It is up to parents and guardians to get educated about this and make healthy decisions about access. Another said the impact that exposure to porn has on a child or teenager was the most important way to mitigate this. And we had another social media one. So I'll kind of talk about them together, and then I can hand it over to you, because a lot of this stuff, I feel like you all know better. Like I said, I'll let you all figure out, and then let me know by the time my daughter is a teenager and has her own phone. But you saw them say a lot, and actually I cut a bunch of their responses that was like, it's different now. Like, the things my parents don't understand is like, things have changed. That was in there many times. And I tell them that a lot, right? When I was a teenager, if you wanted to talk to me, you had to call my house. My dad answered the phone. I wasn't allowed on the phone past 9. Now, right, they can have access to each other pretty much anytime, anywhere. You'll know, it's very different, right, than when we were teenagers. There was a lot of negative about it. The parent did a really good job of kind of talking. We all know this, right, about social media. So it's like, what do we do? Do we tell our kids we can't have it? I mean, every family, right, every person is figuring out that differently. What I tell them is that they are, there's, like, when we went to high school, right, there's not like that expertise or that common knowledge or that shared wisdom about dating and high school relationships with technology. Like, we're not bringing our knowledge and experience into that. Like, there's certain dynamics, of course, that we are. But like I said, if you want to talk to me when I was in high school, you had to call my house, talk to my dad first. Now they can access each other anytime, anywhere. So our parents aren't going to know, right, how to navigate that as inherently as our kid does, right? For every time you've had to have your kid, like, fix your computer or your phone or whatever, like, they know it intuitively because they've grown up with it. And so I don't know the answer to this, but what I would tell you is, you have to engage your kid on it because they are an expert on social media and technology in a way that you are not. And so many of the dynamics and stuff are similar, right? Those relationship dynamics are similar, and so much is different. And I'll tell you, it'll make you feel better because your kids will probably never tell you this, but I hear everywhere I go, or, you know, time and again, from youth that like, because we ask them one of our healthy or unhealthy questions is the adults in your life don't like the person you're dating. And so they always say, like, I consistently, one of the main things I hear every time is, my mom can spot my fake friends before I do. That's like this like refrain I hear in every school, everywhere I go, everywhere. Mom can, especially specifically mom, can spot the fake friends. So they know, right? Like there are parents that care about them. They understand like the life experience and that you've maybe seen your friend go through this and know when someone's being controlling. Like they're aware of that. And so I think we have to meet them and like acknowledge their level of expertise, right? We can't expect the distance and the separation that we had when we were in high school, when they have a supercomputer in their pocket. So I think you kind of have to engage, and I find that youth respond to that the best, right? Is engage their expertise and then bring yours. So that would be my tip for that. As far as porn, a lot of them are aware that it's unrealistic. A lot of them aren't. It's a concern they also have of their peers, as you saw in there. So it is a concern they have. I think it's a conversation. I mean, it's a hard conversation. I will have it with them a little sometimes, but the impact is from you. I mean, basically what I say is, you know, you see an action movie, right? And none of it's real, and that's what porn is. And then just talking about, you know, how exploitative porn is. Not that porn is wrong or you're bad if you've ever seen porn or interested in porn, but it's very exploitative, and it's not real. In the absence of having any conversation or any information, kids will look to porn, right? If they're just Googling, they're like, we have all the information in the world. If they're just Googling, like, who knows what they're going to end up with, and it could be porn. So I feel like that is when we don't provide them anything, porn's going to take up more space, right? When we are having conversations about relationships, bodies, gender, that is your, you know, your shield against porn, that they can realize, just like violence in movies or action in movies, that this is not what a real sex or intimacy is like. All right, I know I can talk and talk and talk, but we're at 8, so what do you all think? Questions, comments, anything you want to say? Yeah, please. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it goes back to them like bullying kids, you know, back in the 6th grade, 7th grade.
Mm-hmm. And you know, yeah. I'm sorry, I should have given it to you. So the question was, right, like that they're not developing interpersonal skills by everything being online, and especially like bullying and things being online. Or everything being virtual is going to like exacerbate that bullying. Texting instead of talking. Yep, that sounds right. So yeah, it's interesting because like so many of the concerns that you all have, they do know, and they do have those concerns. So that's one of the things I asked them, right? I said that question, like your partner texts you constantly, and I asked them like, what's good about that? What's bad about that, basically? And usually they'll say that, right? Is they'll say things like, well, things are misinterpreted via text, or they'll say like, well, sometimes people can only text things and they can't say that to someone, and that's bad. So I hear that all the time in classrooms. So I hope that I can give you a little relief to know that they are, and they probably will never admit it to you, but they are aware. We talked about this a bunch last semester, last semester with our 9th graders. We had 9th graders who were, our 9th graders last quarter. The first quarter we did just seemed less mature than I usually see 9th graders. I think part of it is the technology, but I mean, our COVID, and you know, the virtual year, I mean, I think this was gonna be a problem, but then you put these kids home for, you know, a year and a half, you know, it's the only safe way to communicate, the only way they could for a while. And I do think that has exacerbated it. So I think this is a conversation that we had was and that I was kind of challenging myself when I was kind of like struggling with them on some of these issues. Like, why can't I get through on things that I normally can? And it shouldn't be me being like, what, aren't these kids mature enough to handle this? But I have to recognize these kids missed the 7th grade. And so what do I need to do to meet them where they are because they missed this point? So the COVID thing was huge, but I think just generally speaking with technology is it's not changing, right? It's not going back. And so we do have to place all the limits, but we also have to think, we have to like figure out what is it going to be with how this is, with what this is. And that's where I think engaging them, because they know. There was always horrible bullying in 6th and 7th grade. I think it's just like the hallmark of middle school. But we all know, of course, if you spend any time in any comment section online, that people get way more awful, like behind a screen. I think it's one of those things that we just have to talk to them about. An interesting thing about adolescent brain development, and actually one of the things that comes up here is, even though if you're thinking about it, like something like role plays, of course, if like I was to ask you all to do a role play right now, you would hate me and I would hate me and we'd all hate it. But role plays are real and they work. So when we talk about that brain development, right, that hot cognition, those, we always like are telling people like your brain is not fully developed until you're 25, 26. What is interesting is that we can actually help their brains develop by talking through things, right? Through practicing things, is that makes those neural connections, right? It makes those little pathways in their brain that helps those parts develop faster. And so, I try to find like painless ways to do something like role plays, but just having the conversation with your kid, what if this, what would you say, right? That is going to help their brains like develop, which I think is probably more of those conversations are needed because their communication with each other is not going to change, right? They're still going to be texting and like I think setting limits and putting them in situations where they're with people, all of those things, but also just having more conversations about those interpersonal interactions that's going to help them, right, develop until they, right, are living it and doing it themselves. Please.
Because I had this experience today because we're working with the 9th graders in their English class because they're reading a book and we're doing conflict resolution and conflict styles and empathy. And so we're actually doing they're doing skits and having to resolve conflicts and we're talked about conflict styles. And then the next class is doing 2 different conflict resolution types. And what I've noticed is they are getting better at it. We had to, the English teacher and I had to model what it was like first, but they did, the groups that went later, like the early groups that did their skits struggled more, but as they watched people, the skits got a little bit better. And then, so I'm interesting to see how they develop after they use 2 specific resolution types, type programs to see how they do with it. But it was really out of a need for the kids. They really felt like they struggled with it, and we felt like they were struggling with conflict. And then I also had this thought, we should probably do some skits where they do it via text as well, because this was all conversational. I'm the oldest of the 3 teachers that are doing it, but they also probably didn't have phones in middle school. And so we were we thought back at how did it go today? We're we should probably do some practice if it was a text message that you got, and how do you, or a Snapchat or something, how do you deal with it that way? And I also last week had this realization that some, seniors, when they turn 18, and some, freshmen in college, they really start this online dating. And this is new. And I hadn't thought of that. I mean, I knew that adults used online dating. I just never thought as a high school senior, as an adult, that would use online dating. So that was new for me last week, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to call Taylor about this because she probably has, some good tips and conversations. But it's a lot. They just want connection. They want connection, and that's a way for them to get it. And so it's changing, it's evolving so fast, and we're trying to catch up. But like Taylor said, the kids are the real experts in what they need. And I feel like we also had a social media class that our ninth graders are doing, and they're pretty honest with how they're doing in regards to using social media in our class. So they're not in denial about how it's impacting them. They are aware of it, and I feel like that's kind of the first step. So we're moving. It is 8:04, so please feel free to go, and you can always email me, and Taylor's going to be at our school a ton in the next couple months. So if you have any later questions, please feel free. We're happy to answer them.
Yeah, I would just emphasize the last thing is just you try to use those things, right? Like go with the stream, right? So use that positive peer influence. That's why we kind of have the conversation in the class. And my ideal, that's why I tell the peer educators, my idea is for them to say that to each other, right? That's the first best way. If they don't say it to each other, then I want my peer educators to say it. And if my peer educator doesn't say it, then I'll say it. But that's the order of influence. So if you can get the friends to tell them, or someone who's 2 years older than them to tell them, they're going to listen. But they will, like I said, they're not going to admit a lot of it to you. But I hear them saying it to each other. And so facilitating them to influence each other, right? And to be introspective about that stuff, that's what's going to convince them, because, their brain is firing off, right? When their friend's telling them that. And so anyways, happy to talk to any parents, brainstorm these things. Like I said, I know a lot of this from the perspective of the teenagers. But as far as the limitations and I don't even know when I'm going to give my kid a phone. I'm already stressed about it. So I think it's something where we all learn from each other, right? You all are parenting teenagers right now, right? They are teenagers. I'm talking to teenagers all the time. We all throw our ideas into the hat and then try to give them what they can take, right? To make their decisions, right? Healthier now, later. So. Yeah, thanks everyone online. So, okay. Yeah, of course. I don't know if I turn this off.